Hello everyone, Matt from Model Minutes here and welcome back to the workbench for another unboxing. Today I'm taking a look at this, the Yumo G-4 Super Galeb in 1/72 scale. So join me as I get stuck inside this box and see what this kit is like. So this kit was actually donated to the channel by one of our modelling friends, Ms. Modeler, who for some reason bought an absolute shed load of them. They are a bit rare now, they are a little bit vintage, a little bit rare. A little bit hard to get your hands on, but she managed to get quite a few. So sent one over for me to have a look at and potentially build and see what I can do with it. So thanks very much, Ms. Modeler. I will link her video to this particular model kit that she's already done. She goes into much more detail than I probably will over sort of like the history and stuff. So definitely worth checking that out if you'd like additional context. But in a nutshell, as it says on here, it was a Yugoslav trainer and light strike aircraft. And we have an image on the box here of the aircraft in flight. 1/72 scale, and it tells us a product code of A001. Flipping over to the thin edge here, it says suitable for children from 7 years onwards. Figures of pilots, paint and cement are not included. It does have small parts, and we have an address here. Flip over to the other edge here, and we have some indication of the paint schemes that are included. We've got a Yugoslav Air Force One before 1992. We've got a Bosnian Serb Air Force One and a Burma Air Force One as well. So it's a slightly obscure aircraft that perhaps not many people will have known of, because I certainly didn't. But it does bear a bit of a striking resemblance to the Hawk trainer aircraft that we would have in the UK. On the other thin edges, we just have the same information that we have already seen, and the back of the box doesn't feature of anything of note. So let's open it up and see what we've got. Now, naturally, this is a vintage style kit in the sense that this has been around for a very long time, potentially in storage. So we have a little bit of discoloration of the paperwork. We do have on here a photo of the actual aircraft and some information about the actual Super Galeb, and then some technical data as well, which is quite interesting to read. Moving on down, we have some information about what we should do before we build the kit, and then we have paint color callouts. These are quite similar to other companies out there. They give a suggested color from a different manufacturer, and then they give it a letter, so you can basically pick the color that you want. We do have some suggestions of things that we're going to be coming next in the range as well. And then if we flip over to the first page, and that's our instructions. That's everything that's going on. You can see the pages have suffered a little bit of discoloration, but it isn't going to detract from us being able to follow the information. So instructions, a little bit cluttered, quite a bit going on. It would appear up here, we've got our seats need to be glued inside of our cockpit, and there's control panels and control sticks. No pilots. I don't believe there's a display stand either, so it's going to be a wheels down option unless you can come up with a solution to that problem. Paint color callouts are the little triangles, and you can see that we do have different options based on the paint scheme that we're going to do, so for some little aerials and things. Fuselage halves sandwich the cockpit as well as the exhaust, and then we have air intakes on the side. The wings come in two halves which get glued together, and they have these wing fences which need to be glued in as well. Nose goes in. Does it make reference to adding weight? I imagine you would need to add weight in the nose, but it doesn't make reference to it, so I probably will just for safety so that it doesn't sit on its tail. Canopy gets glued on, tail surfaces and wing gets added to the fuselage, and then we come down to the lower side. The lower side's got quite a bit going on. There's all these little, they're like little wing fences or actuators for the flaps and things, so they need to be glued in. We also have pylons for underwing weapons if you'd like to use them, and we also have our landing gear. It would appear that we do have some instructions on cutting something here. I believe those are the landing gear doors. Yes, they are. You need to cut them, otherwise they would not be correct. However, I imagine because you need to cut them, that does mean that you could glue them in raised. Here we are, look, so you could do a raised option if you would prefer. No display stand is included though, so obviously you would have to come up with a solution for that. Underwing stores are a number of parts. It looks like we've got rockets and bombs, and we also have a underslung sort of machine gun pod or cannon pod which gets glued in here as well. All of these can be added into the model, small details as well, and that's it. So it doesn't look overly complicated, but we do have a few little options, which is nice. Coming over to the painting instructions. So these are printed in black and white, which is not fantastic. It can lead to a little bit of ambiguity, but I think if I'm just careful and I take my time and I also look up images of the real aircraft, I might be able to come up with the correct colours. On the whole, it does seem to be like dark green, dark grey, and then a light grey underneath. So, you know, it's kind of almost like Royal Air Force kind of paint schemes that they were using as well. So I probably will have a suitable colour for this. They all look to be mostly the same apart from this one down here, which I think is just one colour. But again, we did have them annotated on the box here, and you can see that, yeah, on the whole, this one is overall upper green and with a lower bluey grey, and then these two are a camouflage mix, but we do have a sort of red underside tail part here as well, which will need to be picked out separately. So painting should be relatively straightforward, I would like to think, but yeah, I'll just have to, I'm not sure which one I want to do. I know there was like a training display version, but I'll probably go with one of the kit versions here. We do have exploded diagrams as well, based on whether certain details need to be included, like here on the nose, for example. It tells us how wide the band should be, but I might just eyeball those with a bit of tape. And that is pretty much it, other than the stencils. So it would appear that the stencils are like present, and there's an awful lot of them, and they must be generic between the different aircraft as well. So there's loads of different stencils to put on there. Not looking forward to that. Stencils are not one of my favorite things, but yeah, it's nice that they've been included. And actually, for a slightly more obscure brand, I wasn't really expecting this amount of like stuff. It's not bad, is it? Right, let's move on. So everything, as you can see in the box here, is still sealed, which is great. So although technically this is second hand, everything is still in its original packaging. It's never been opened, which is really nice. So the clear parts are at the top of this heat sealed bag, and the clear parts are our sort of nose and the canopy. So the canopy looks all right. It has got a little bit of scuffing, I think, on the inside perhaps. It's going to need a little, might be a little wipe down just to clean it up, but on the whole it looks okay. There's not much in the way of flash. There is a slight like imperfection or a line across there, but I don't think that'll be noticeable in the finished build. The framework is on the outside surface and it's relatively proud, so masking this should be fairly straightforward. It comes as a single piece, so you can't display this open unless you modify it, but I won't see the need in doing that. And then we do have a small clear part here. I can't remember what that's for, but it is included. And yeah, no, this looks okay, doesn't it? Big Yumo there. Let us move on to the rest of the bag. I want to look at the decals first before I get into the rest of the plastic parts. So let's get them out. So the decals, quite a big sheet actually. A little bit crimpled, and no protective paper. There is a few little dents in places, but that's obviously where it's been in the bag. Fortunately though, this was the outside and this side was facing the plastic parts, which means that potentially no damage has really occurred. And here you can see that we've got our different scheme options, and then all of the ones down here are common. We have printed by Propag team in 1997 in the Czech Republic. I have used their decals before. Obviously this is quite old now, but they should be okay. Fortunately, despite the age, there isn't anything in the way of yellowing. The printing is actually quite good. There is ever so slightly a little bit of registration misalignment in a few places, like the yellow triangles in the center here are ever so slightly off to one side, but it's not like massive. It's not really noticeable. The decals actually look okay. There is a little bit of excessive decal film around the outside of some of the transfers, but on the whole the printing is pretty nice. The small text is not particularly legible, but I mean it's quite tiny, and the printing is better than other kits I've seen which have been manufactured more recently from other manufacturers. Not all, but some. There is perhaps a little bit of some scuffing up here. There's just a little bit of printing missing. I think they may have been silkscreen printed, but I'm not entirely sure. The decal film does look quite thin, but I'm hoping that when I come to apply them, because I can't see any tears, I can't see any real problems, maybe a few little scuffs in places, but I'm hoping they're going to be absolutely fine to apply. But I guess I'll have to see when we get to that point. But yeah, nice big sheet of decals. Lots of stencils, not looking forward to that, but yeah, pretty decent. This then brings us on to the rest of the plastic parts, and it's a 2-sprue wonder, just 2 sprues. So let's take a look at this sprue here then first. This one features one of our fuselage halves, which I believe we may have to remove some of these bits depending on the variant. But actually, plastic feels quite smooth, maybe just a touch, ever so slight touch of mold release on there, relatively dense. But actually we have recessed panel lines, which is nice to see. Maybe they're not molded quite as finely as other manufacturers, but actually they're quite nice. They're relatively subtle. The reproduction of the details are quite nice. We do have some little rivet details in a few places. There is some flash, though. There's a few bits of flash in places which will need to be cleaned up. Rocket control panels, little wing fence type things. Lower side surface there looks to be molded to a nice quality. This actually looks pretty decent. Ejector pin marks appear to be on this side, but they don't appear to be particularly present on visible surfaces, which is really good. There is a bit of a representation of internal cockpit detail there, but I guess given the small scale, they weren't too fussed about that. But yeah, it looks okay, doesn't it? I was actually, like, when I'd heard about this kit, and it was a 90s kit, I was expecting it to be like more tatty and not as nice, but actually the tooling is pretty decent. So the second sprue then, we have, again, another fuselage half. Moulding's fairly okay. A little bit of flash in places, but we have some lovely detail reproduced. Landing gear legs and wheels. Details are quite subtle on there, but they've tried to reproduce them. A bit of flash in a few places. The chairs, actually, I've seen way worse from other companies. They've got moulded harness details on there, so that's quite good. Underside cannon pod. And then upper wing surfaces, which have, again, recessed panel lines and details present. Pretty nice looking kit, actually, for a 90s tooling. I say that because we know it's a 90s tooling because we've seen some dates on here already. A little bit of internal detail for the landing gear bay, but not a great deal. But yeah, this is looking quite good. Flash is manageable. Ejector pin marks are manageable as well. I'm hoping that it builds up quite nicely. But yeah, that's actually not a bad looking kit. So we had two darkish grey plastic sprues molded to a reasonable quality. Yes, there's a bit of flash. Yes, it is perhaps showing its age a little bit. But on the whole, the level of detail is actually pretty nice. Yes, it does bear some sort of similar resemblance to a Hawk, but from my recollection of kits from other manufacturers around this same sort of time, it's not bad. And actually, this sort of level of detail, you could sort of hold a candle to it today, like other companies are still pushing to get to this sort of standard. So that's not terrible, is it? Pretty good. We had our clear sprue, which are molded to a nice quality. The plastic is quite clear, perhaps a few scuffs in places, but generally pretty decent. And we had one relatively large sheet of decals with 3 paint schemes included, which is nice. Slight registration issues in a few places, but nothing too major. But on the whole, they look to be printed to a nice quality, and you've got loads of stencils. Instructions, of course, have aged a little bit dated, a little bit yellowed, suffered a little bit of damage here and there. Printed in black and white, which is not great. I would have preferred to have it in colour, but naturally product of its time. Perhaps the instructions here are a little bit cluttered, but I think they'll be easy to follow. The only thing I would say is make sure that you find some weight to put in the nose, just so it doesn't sit on its tail. It doesn't make reference that you need it, but I definitely would look into that. Also, no pilot figures and no display stand, although you do have the option to raise the landing gear by gluing in the covers underneath if you'd like to do so, but it's not really potentially an option in this kit if you haven't got pilots or a stand. Lots of stencils, of course, if you like that sort of thing, all of which came contained within a nice looking box. Granted, it's got that very sort of 90s color palette that we would have been familiar with at the time, but we do have some images of the different paint schemes in color on the side, which might help a little bit, but I'll probably have to do some research. So that is pretty much it. A little bit of history of this kit then. This was a 1997 release. This is the release from 1997. It was fortunate that it was all sealed. Everything in here is original as far as I can tell. It has been available a couple of times since 2002, probably the last major sort of period, but there was also a reboxing in 2010. But it is my understanding that this is a fairly rare kit now. I know Miss Modeler was very fortunate to get quite a few of these to mess around with. which is why she, very kindly let me have one. But yeah, I've struggled to actually pin down a price for this. I did a bit of Googling. I looked online. I can't really find any for sale anywhere. So it's really hard to determine a price. I think she mentions how much she paid for hers in her video. So definitely go and check that out. If I had to go off of the quality that I've seen here, 3 paint schemes, the level of detail. Do you know what? It's a vintage kit. I would say probably if you could find one for between £10 and £15, that would be a good price. Naturally, they're rare, so the price might be a little bit higher, and they are slightly obscure as well. So you may be pushing that up to the £20 mark if you really wanted to get hold of one. But naturally, prices can be quite subjective based on who you are and what you want from it. So you would have to find your own value. So let me know down in the comments, how much would you be willing to pay for a slightly obscure subject such as this? And are you looking forward to seeing if I can have a go at building such a, I would say, rare kit, because it's really difficult to find them now. Once again, thanks to Miss Modeler for supporting my plastic edition and increasing my stash size. And thanks to my Model Club members for the extra support they give the channel. Massive thanks to these guys on screen. And if you'd like to join them, check out the links in the description to find out how. You can also support the channel in other ways, so check out the links below. The best way to support this channel for free, though, is by subscribing with notifications turned on so you never miss a modelling upload. Finally, though, last thing to say is a massive thank you to you for watching this one, and I'll see you on the workbench again next time.